Fox News Alert crews on the scene of a car crash near Logan Airport in Boston. State police saying that a vehicle ran into a group of pedestrians very close there to the airport. Early reports saying that several people have been hurt. We're not sure how seriously yet at this time, but the FBI is telling Fox News that at this point it appears accidental, that the driver is cooperative, that there's no nexus to terrorism at this point in time.
You are looking at live pictures here of someone clearly on a gurney. This is Boston Logan Airport. And sadly, let me just tell you what we're learning. This is according to Massachusetts State Police, that a car, I don't know if it's that white taxi cab that's in the middle of the scene or another car. We don't know yet. This is all just happening now. But a car has plowed over a number of pedestrians at the Boston airport. Here's a wider shot so you can get a sense of what's happened. This is all happening now. The information is just coming into us. So let me just be totally transparent. We don't know a lot. You can see paramedics on the scene, fire, EMS. Almost looks like that's near the taxi cab lot, right, where they all wait before they line in to pick people up. That's the broader scene. You can see some pieces of, who knows if that's pieces of the car or items that were on these different individuals before they were hit. And according to police, the severity of the injuries range. So some severe, some not as severe. We're still also waiting to see if there are any fatalities. We don't know yet, but clearly this was serious as they are putting one of several people hit inside the back of the ambulance.
We start with breaking news. Greek Coast Guards have reportedly fired at a Turkish cargo ship in the Aegean Sea.
Actually, the details are still emerging. What we do know at this point in time is that this ship was heading from Iskenderun. It is one of the ports in the south of the country. And as you mentioned there, it was heading to Izmit, which is in the northwest of the country. We understand that this cargo ship was carrying steel. Now, as it was crossing the Rhodes Island, the Greek Coast Guards ordered the ship to divert from its course and to report to the Rhodes Island. Now, the captain of the ship pointed out that they were in international waters and they were not bound to follow such orders. And what the captain did was that he informed the Turkish authorities. Now, the Greek officials, according to the captain, resorted to firing on the ship, and the captain says that there are at least 16 bullet holes on the ship. Now, the ship, of course, managed to leave that area, and from the international waters it entered the Turkish territory. And of course, at this point in time, we understand that the ship, according to Turkish officials, they're going to be probing this matter, and they're also going to be determining as to precisely what happened.
A U.S. think tank says China's built new military facilities in the Spratly Islands in the South China Sea. The Asian Maritime Transparency Initiative said June 29th, satellite imagery shows the new facilities have been built on Fiery Cross, Mischief, and Subi Reefs. The report said 4 new missile shelters have been built on Fiery Cross and that radar and communications facilities have been spotted on Mischief Reef. The think tank also said China is building underground structures there which could be used to store munitions. According to the report, Beijing can now, quote, deploy military assets, including combat aircraft and missile launchers, to the Spratly Islands at any time.
China's leader, Xi Jinping, is in Moscow for a 2-day official visit. He's set to meet President Vladimir Putin later on Monday. It's known that one of the topics to be discussed will be the international tensions over North Korea, and the talks come at a volatile period in U.S.-China ties, as Murad Gazdiev explains.
Things are getting very hot in the South China Sea area.
China claims the U.S. Navy is conducting provocative operations in the South China Sea. Fox News was the first to report the USS Steedham sailed near Triton Island on Sunday. China claims the island as its own and thus the waters surrounding it. In April, the Navy announced that the destroyer was conducting operations in the South China Sea. On Sunday, a military spokesman wouldn't confirm the ship's route, only saying it routinely conducts freedom of navigation operations. China's foreign ministry, on the other hand, said the U.S., quote, deliberately stirs up trouble, and that Sunday's operation, quote, constitutes a serious political and military provocation. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke on the phone the same day. The White House said the two talked about North Korea's missile program, but a Chinese state media outlet reported they talked about the country's relationship. Xi reportedly told Trump the U.S.-China relationship is better, but that there are some negative factors affecting it. Some recent factors might include the U.S. announcing plans to sell a military arms package worth $1.4 billion to Taiwan and propose sanctions against a Chinese bank with ties to North Korea. Also within the past week, the State Department singled out China for being one of the worst offenders of human trafficking in the world.
China's foreign ministry says the boundary had already been set in an agreement signed more than 120 years ago, contradicting a recent statement by India, which claims the border issue is unsettled. Chinese foreign ministry spokesman Geng Shuang told a daily news briefing on Monday that the Sikkim part of the border was settled in the convention between China and Britain in 1890. He noted that the convention has been upheld by previous Indian governments and was reaffirmed by former Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru in a letter in 1959. The spokesperson also reiterated a demand for India to withdraw its troops from Chinese territory.
We begin this morning with the president pouncing on the media. President Trump tweeting out this video over the weekend showing him in an old WWE clip. But in this version, you can see he is body slamming CNN.
The official presidential tweet is an old wrestling video takedown with businessman Trump, doctored with the CNN logo covering the face of his victim. One face of the media pummeled in the world of fake wrestling. Outrage even from Republicans immediately.
The President of the United States is inciting violence against the free press.
But the president defended by his Homeland Security advisor, who saw this for the first time on This Week.
You're in charge of Homeland Security there. Yep. That seems like a threat.
Yeah, certainly not, though. I think that no one would perceive that as a threat. I hope they don't.
Elected Republicans quickly denouncing the president's attack on journalists and the First Amendment.
This is the 4th of July weekend. The Declaration of Independence is pretty dang clear about this.
It's ridiculous, right? Everybody's kind of flabbergasted, and, you know, he had to stop doing it.
But hours earlier, Mr. Trump, marking his first 4th of July as president, escalated his war of words about those who write about him.
The fake media tried to stop us from going to the White House, but I'm president and they're not.
The president, in another tweet, calling his comments modern-day presidential.
NBC reports that people gathered in cities across the United States just 2 days before Independence Day to call on Congress to impeach President Donald Trump. Thousands were expected at impeachment marches from sea to shining sea on Sunday, with demonstrators rallying in New York, Philadelphia, Austin, New Orleans, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and dozens of other locations. The event's website states, quote, Donald Trump has been in blatant violation of the Constitution from the day he was sworn into the office of president. It is time that congressional representatives do their job and start the process to impeach this president.
WikiLeaks chief Julian Assange has claimed liberals in the US are liberal no more. He's published a collection of clips and articles, all calling for his killing. RT's Polly Boyko delves deeper into the story.
Julian Assange has clearly done a bit of work collating this list of old social media posts of so-called liberals calling for his assassination. He's retweeted dozens of old tweets and links to articles calling for his death. And among the ways in which they call for his death, there are suggestions to hang him or to kill him via a drone attack. And what's interesting is this list features both ordinary people who say all sorts of stuff on Twitter all the time, but also it features journalists from notable publications, big media outlets, and political activists. Take a listen to what Julian Assange had to say about all of this.
What can I say? Liberals ain't liberals. They've fallen into bed with the worst elements of state hard power and love, censorship, and death.
Police have arrested a man accused of plotting to assassinate French President Emmanuel Macron. A source tells AFP news agency the suspect is a 23-year-old self-described nationalist. He was charged Saturday, July 1st with plotting to commit a terrorist act. He'd been arrested just days earlier in his suburban Paris home. AFP reports the suspect told authorities he wanted to kill Macron during Paris's upcoming Bastille Day parade. adding that he wanted to attack, quote, Muslims, Jews, blacks, and homosexuals. Police have not released the suspect's name, but he was reportedly convicted just last year on charges of condoning terrorism. France has been in a state of emergency since a series of coordinated terrorist attacks left 130 people dead in November 2015. On Monday, however, President Macron announced plans to lift that state of emergency this fall. He told a joint session of Parliament the move would, quote, reestablish the freedoms of the French people.
8 people have been wounded in a shooting near this mosque in the southern French city of Avignon. Police say they suspect the incident to be a dispute between youths. 2 of the 8 wounded were taken to hospital, according to a local resident. The witness said a car had pulled up with 4 people inside. The 2 in the back got out and started shooting a targeted group. A local newspaper cited witnesses saying one of the 2 gunmen had their face covered. Worshippers leaving the mosque had not been the intended target.
Italy is getting angry as it seeks support from other European countries over the migrant crisis. It's threatened to close its ports to rescue ships. The Interior Minister claims the country is under huge pressure. That's as the country's taken in hundreds of thousands of people who've crossed the Mediterranean from Africa. According to the UN, almost 84,000 people have arrived at Italian ports since the start of the year. As some estimates predict, the number will jump to 220,000 by the end of 2017. While Italy calls on neighbours to help, France has even used drones and dogs to hunt down those trying to slip across the border between the countries. With the migrant crisis gripping Italy, reports are emerging that mafia gangs have been increasing their influence in the Sicilian port of Palermo by taking advantage of refugees. RT's Charlotte Dubensky travelled to the port and used a hidden camera to some areas to find out exactly what's happening.
Just behind me is where the famous Sicilian market Ballaro takes place here in Palermo every day. And while in the day it's a hotspot for tourists, in fact they're recommended to go and see the market as one of the things to do here when you're on the island of Sicily. But at night the market turns into something completely different, and instead of selling fresh produce and fish, what's being sold on the streets here is hard drugs. And the majority of the people selling those drugs are migrants from Africa. That's what we've been told by one local journalist, Francesco Bellina. We film in secret with him on the streets.
Here there is very powerful traffic of heroin, crack, marijuana and other kind of drugs. Mafia bosses need to use somebody for sell drugs. So in this case, in this period, they are using also migrants, specifically Nigerian migrants, because there is a relationship between mafia and this gang called Black Axe.
Sicily has a long history of crime, mainly perpetrated by the mafia. What's happening now is that it's teaming up with migrants to carry out criminal activities. The main migrant gang is Black Axe, which is forcing new migrants to work for them.
So they call me, I should join them for violence, oppression, for in the Palermo. So I told them, I don't live that kind of life, you know. Then put hand in my pocket and take my phone, you know. I drag with my phone, then take my glass, you know. Another guy take bottle and hit him in my head.
Now we're unveiling to serve everybody. Come taste my plum cake and drink my smoothie. People are talking bad about me.
The refugees that are coming to Europe, they are like zombies when they come here. That they're not to blame for that, but I think when they come here, they don't have opportunities that they should get. You know? So they're like living dead here.
This would be great news if ISIS is actually defeated in Mosul. But, you know, what's going to happen? Are the terrorists just going to scatter like cockroaches with the guys we can't kill.
No, absolutely. They're going to find quarter in any state in the Middle East that suffers from a lack of political power, primarily Libya, I think, where ISIS already has a presence, where there's competing governmental authorities, and which the Obama administration in its last couple of months seemed to be targeting more and more with counterterrorism strikes.
Do you think that will continue, and that will be where the war on terrorism, on ISIS, and this philosophy will spread?
Absolutely, because it's also tied up in the Sunni-Shia dispute, which is driving a lot of the Sunni radicalism that produces groups like ISIS. You know, this ideology is a function of the Sunni state's reaction to the unprecedented level of Shia power and the strength of Iran, and the Sunni fear that Iran is trying to dominate the Middle East.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte says that after militants in Marawi are defeated, he will go after their arms supplier. While speaking to police officers on Thursday, June 28, Duterte said, quote, "It would be good after this war to start looking into where the firearms and ammunition came from." The military has expressed surprise that the militants do not seem to be running out of ammunition in the fight for Marawi, which has dragged on for over a month. The government has previously said they suspect the militants acquired weapons through the MILF and MNLF rebel groups operating in Mindanao. However, some high-powered weapons and ammunition have been traced back to the Department of National Defense, prompting Duterte to order an investigation into how they ended up in militants' hands.
Ana grenade, ana tingin na projectile, pamumuyan mo ka na narilanyo kami yung okay. Yeah, nabupya tulad na klase niyan, may to. Marawi City is an urban city. So differently, nandyan lang yan sa mga building, sa street, sa likod ng bahay o harapan.
Hundreds of Venetians have held a protest to demonstrate against the amount of tourists who visit the city. Carrying placards to Venice's landmarks and Mark Square, they called for the number of visitors to be restricted. Locals claim the tourist influx has turned the ancient lagoon city into a huge hotel, which is too expensive for ordinary Venetians to live in. Residents are also angry that many of Venice's traditional shops have been turned into souvenir stores and mini-marts.
Pues ellos, los mareños, le llaman la princesa. Entonces yo soy ahorita el papel que juego es ser el esposo de esa princesa.
After a government shutdown left the state beaches of New Jersey closed during the 4th of July weekend, thousands of locals had to find other ways to enjoy their long holiday break. But not New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Christie and his family were spotted on Sunday lounging on the sand at Island Beach State Park, one of the numerous parks and beaches closed by the government shutdown. In pictures published by NJ.com, the Christie family appeared to have the sun and the sand, which would normally be packed with families enjoying the holiday weekend, all to themselves. After being spotted on the beach on Sunday, Christie flew to Trenton to speak with reporters about the government shutdown. The Christie family was using a state residence, which the governor mentioned he had been using for the weekend during the Sunday news conference. Christie said, "That's where my family is sleeping, so that's where I'll sleep."